discovering new things, new places, new cultures. And I think for me, this is not why I started out traveling, but now actually I also travel as a way to educate. So I like to encourage people to go to places where they wouldn't go to. They wouldn't initially think about going to. So places like Asia. I mean, I went to Tibet. Now, I don't know how many other Black people have been to Tibet, but when I was in Tibet, I felt like I was the only Black person in the country. And I was treated like the only Black person in the country.
Hey, welcome to Travel Tuesday Happy Hour, where we interview dope people doing dope things. I would like to introduce you to an amazing woman. Tell us who you are and what it is that you do.
So I am Jacqueline. I live in London. I was born in Uganda, but I've lived most of my life in London. And for what I do, I would like to say that I'm a reader, I'm a traveler, I'm a podcaster, and photographer. And when I'm not doing all those things, I work in the finance industry as a compliance analyst. So a couple of things.
Yeah, you are truly from the diaspora, because only members of the diaspora can wear so many hats so gracefully, you know? So born in Uganda and now in London, how did that transition occur?
Well, I was just kicking and screaming from you. I was in boarding school, and then one day my parents just came and picked me up, and the next day we were on a flight to London, and I pretty much, I started going to school the following week, and I've lived in London ever since. So I didn't have a choice in the matter. I've been given the choice. I probably would have loved to stay in Uganda for my school, especially my younger schooling years, because I think London was very challenging when I arrived.
And so, have you been back since?
Oh yeah, my father moved back to Uganda in 2007. But even before that, I already started going back. So I tried to go back every other year. I was supposed to go back in January of this year, but unfortunately, COVID, things started happening with COVID. So I haven't been able to go. So I'm planning hopefully to again next year. I haven't been since 2017, and I'm finding that I'm really.
Okay. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. Really, what got you into traveling? I mean, you did allude to this was kicking and screaming, but as a child on a plane for the first time to London, did that contribute to your spark and curiosity to travel?
No. And I think after that, I actually didn't travel. I think so. I was about 13, 14 when I left Uganda. And I didn't travel after that until I was in my late 20s. So I didn't actually get back into traveling until I think the first time I got on a plane was on a trip to the Caribbean when my friends said, let's do something different. And I think that is what sparked off my desire to travel. I went to Barbados and saw how absolutely beautiful it was. And then I realized how much I was missing the sun. You don't get very much sunshine in England. And so I decided that actually I wanted to spend more time in the sun. And then after that, I tried to travel every year to somewhere new. And then every year became once a year. And then after that, once a year just became too short. And then twice a year. And then now I do at least 3-4 times a year somewhere different. I absolutely became addicted after 2 years of doing it. I became absolutely addicted. And now I find that I can't stop. I find that if I'm not traveling, I don't feel right within. I absolutely love it.
I mean, travel is therapy for a lot of us, and especially in a time like this when we can't travel, all we can experience all we can now travel-wise experience is through stories, right? So
exactly.
So tell me about this planning out for this first trip to the Caribbean. Was it a hey girls, let's go, or it was like 30 people and then it wind down to 5 people, and how did that turn out for you?
So it started off as 3 people. Luckily, this was a small group. So it started off as 3 people wanting to go. And then we talked about where we want to go. And then one person wasn't really sure when it came time to pay pay the deposit. And because I hadn't really been anywhere, this was for me, other than coming to the UK, this was my first experience traveling. I wasn't really sure what to expect. But in the end, I just decided, you know what? Okay, even if it's just the two of us, I'm going to pay my deposit anyway. I want to just do something different. And so I paid my deposit, and at the end, it was just the two of us. But I sort of understand when it comes to planning a trip, it is very, very difficult to get people, number one, to agree. People at the beginning would say, oh, I'm coming. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to putting down a deposit, the numbers go down. And then slowly, you really get to see serious. I think I've traveled solo and also traveled as part of the group. And the last trip I organized was initially started off as 20 people. And then by the time we got to traveling, there was only 9 of us altogether. So, yes, so it is tough to organize a trip and to get everybody to agree on what to do. But I'm lucky now that I have a really good set of friends that I travel with. And if I want to do something or arrange something to go somewhere, I know who's serious and who's not. And so I just send out a quick message, and when they do come to me and they say that they want to go, now I know that actually they are serious and they will go. So I'm very lucky in that respect now. But it's taken a while to get there.
I can only imagine. So as far as that first trip to the Caribbean, what was that like, right? Because you mentioned that you forgot how much you enjoy the sun, right?
Yes.
And we all know London is hit or miss when it comes to great weather. So tell us about that trip.
Most of the time.
So tell us how that trip kind of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of reminded you of how the sun made you feel back home.
Where do I begin? First of all, it was just as soon as I came out of the aeroplane, and so when we landed, you don't have a walkway through which you go through. You actually climb the stairs and you come down of the flight, and then you hit you're just outside. So as soon as the plane landed, the first thing I felt on my skin was hot sunshine, and I hadn't felt that in like forever, and so that was just amazing. Just being in the hot sunshine. I mean, because I hadn't been in sun for so long, I think I just started dripping sweat. But it was good sweat. I enjoyed it. And then walking into the airport and just seeing people who looked like me, that again just took me back to being home. Because you forget when you live somewhere like this, you kind of forget that actually there are places where the majority of people look like you. So for me, just stepping out into an airport where most of the people look like me was absolutely amazing. And then when I finally went into the hotel and started walking around, I saw mangoes, plenty mangoes. I saw guavas, I saw sugarcane, and all of these foods I hadn't seen for such a long time. And it was just so amazing. I absolutely loved it. And I think that really did inspire me to go home the following year, because I hadn't been home since I'd come. And going to Barbados made me want to go home. And the following year, I booked an arranged trip to go home.
That's amazing. That's amazing because, my family is from Haiti. And every time I travel to either an African country or the West Indies, I start to notice familiarities in the food, in the culture, in the scenery, because it's like everywhere has one architect that kind of builds everything, right? And, this past year I went to Ghana, and, I know a lot of the descendants from Africa didn't necessarily land in Haiti, but it's like you look at the culture, you look at the scenery, you look at you look at everything and you're like, whoa, this reminds me of going back to Haiti, and then now I'm saying, whoa, Haiti reminds me of going to Africa. And so, having these experiences really kind of give you a different perspective on how, no matter how far disconnected we are from the continent, everything finds a way of bringing us back.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, do you have like a top 5 places you've been so far?
Yes, actually, that's actually quite hard to choose, but I have countries that I was just like amazed, and I'll go back to over and over again if there were not enough countries already in the world that I want to see. But yeah, so I think top of my list, my top 5, and in no particular order, I would definitely have Cuba. Absolutely, absolutely love Cuba. Cuba is one of the places, as soon as I landed, I just felt at home. I don't know what it was, maybe the smell of petrol or the heat, but as soon as I landed, I was at home. So Cuba, definitely. Japan, I absolutely love Japan. Japan is so different. So busy, it's so bright, and the food is absolutely amazing. So definitely Japan. I love Ghana. I've been to Ghana twice now, and I would go back again. In fact, even with COVID, I still want to go back this Christmas. So we'll see how that goes. So definitely Ghana. I absolutely loved Rwanda. Now, Rwanda is not on many people's list, but actually it's amazing. It's so lush, it's so green, people are so friendly. And of all the African countries that I've been to, it's the most organized. So I like that aspect of it. And then I think the fifth one, I would say Namibia. Namibia, because it's so varied. It's one side, absolutely dry, arid desert, so scenic, so beautiful. And then the other side, you have winter weather. So you can drive from one end, from desert one end, and then to so from 45 degrees, 16 degrees, same country. And then it has amazing wildlife and rock formation. It's just, yeah, I absolutely love Namibia as well. But yeah, I think those would be my top 5, but there's so many others that I could have chosen from.
Okay, I need to. So now that we're friends, I don't see why I'm not on your next set of trips, right? So I'll just make sure I'll keep my eye out for whenever you post. I'll just make sure I put my deposit so I can make it out there with you. I like the fact that you brought up Rwanda and Namibia. How do I say? Yeah, there you go. You got it. Because these aren't the most luxurious locations. That's presented, right? I'm not saying it's not, but that's presented. And then number 2, there's a lot of, I don't want to say propaganda, but not necessarily a lot of positive around that, right? And I appreciate what draw you to go to both countries, despite the exposure, right? Because the first time, I hope some of my listeners are like, oh wow, I never thought of Rwanda. You know, everybody's thinking of coastal countries because those are probably most popular with beaches and access to water. But what made you select those 2 of all?
Right, so Rwanda's next to Uganda, and I was feeling. So I took a year out from work and actually went on sabbatical. And through most of that, I was traveling within Africa. So during that time, I was in Uganda for 3 months, and I was feeling a bit bored. I just decided to hop on a bus and go to Rwanda. It wasn't planned; it was just a spontaneous thing. I just got on a bus, didn't have anywhere to stay, but decided I'll find somewhere to stay when I got there. And so Rwanda was sort of discovered by accident. I really didn't plan to go. And I was just really pleasantly surprised. I know Rwanda is mainly known for the genocide and for a whole lot of people dying, but they have moved on from that. I mean, President Kagame, yes, there's a bit of controversy as to how he's leading the country, but actually, I think that he has done a good job. Rwanda, from where it was from when it was at war to Rwanda now, is a very different country. You have, as I said earlier on, it's one of the more organized African countries I've been to. You have working traffic lights, you have the banned plastic bags, you do have the motorcycle taxis, but actually every one of them is required to wear a helmet for safety reasons. So, and the roads are clean. One Saturday every month, everybody is encouraged to go out and clean the streets in the country. So it's for me, I think it's a very organized country, and it's also really, really, really beautiful. It's, I think, called the land of the thousand hills. the French call it a land of the thousand hills. It's very hilly, and as you drive through the country, you're constantly dipping into valleys and hills. And then also, the other really good thing about it is the climate. It's not as hot as some of the African countries. So there's just so much about Rwanda that's great. And so I loved that about it. And so I went there the first time, actually by accident, but actually the second time I just wanted to experience the culture. It is next door to Uganda, and you do have a lot of people from Rwandan origin in Uganda as well. So I knew a little about the culture, but not very much. The second time I went, it was just for the culture. So there was a lot of dances, there was a lot of museums, and I guess this time decided to interact with more with people in the street. And so it was just more of a cultural discovery of the country. But as I did discover the actual very, very significant Uganda. Now, in Namibia, on the other hand, I decided at the end of last year to do a trip from Cape Town all the way to Victoria Falls. And Namibia just happened to be in the middle. I mean, I hadn't really been to Southern Africa. And so I thought, it was really, really a good trip to actually see the whole of Southern Africa. And it would be really great if I could just do most of it at the same time. So the trip took me from Cape Town and driving through Namibia. And that's how I managed to cover this really beautiful, vast country. And so many different tribal groups, so many different types of landscapes. And yet, just the food as well. It's very, the one thing that saddened me about Namibia is that up until the 1980s, it was still colony of South Africa. And so you have a lot of white South Africans owning a lot of the land. So as you drive through, all the wine vineyards are owned by white South Africans, the Afrikaners. When you get to places like Waverley, all the shopping centers are owned by Afrikaners. The beautiful properties, again, they're all owned by the white South Africans. So that kind of really saddened me about the country. And then I went to a city called Stockholm. Now, Stockholm is German, basically. The street names are German. The beer halls and the pubs are German. The people are German. I was there on Christmas Eve, and it was just full of Germans. And I've never been anywhere on the African continent where I just thought, I wasn't in Africa. So South Africa and Namibia, I really did not feel like I was on the African continent because there's a lot of European influence, and there are a lot of Europeans within that part of the continent. You do see, there are Black people, and the majority are Black people, but unfortunately, they're not in the position of wealth. Most of the things and most of the hotels that you stay in, most of the places that you go to eat, they're all white owned. So that kind of really pains me. And I think that even pained me more was, as a Black person, I was treated worse than the white people that I was traveling with were. So in some places, I was assumed to be one of the guides, or one of the guides, or someone helping out with the white tourists. So, and then other places, when I went to a restaurant to get something to eat, although I'm standing at the bar waiting, another white person would come, and then they'll get served before I was served. So things like that really pain me, because I'm thinking to myself, I am at home, I am on the continent. If these people came here to the UK, for example, they wouldn't get the preferential treatment that they're giving the white tourists. So I did try to educate. I don't think I got very far. But yeah, so there's some things that really I found out when I was out there.
So that's interesting. So with that said, what still drives you? I mean, that I know that wasn't the majority of your experience while traveling. So what drives you to travel today?
Discovering new things, new places, new cultures. And I think for me, this is not why I started out traveling, but now I'm able to travel as a way to educate. So I like to encourage people to go to places where they wouldn't go to, they wouldn't initially think about going to. So places like Asia, I went to Tibet. Now, I don't know how many other Black people have been to Tibet, but when I was in Tibet, I felt like I was the only Black person in the country. And I was treated like the only Black person in the country because people were shocked when they saw me. So I like to use it as an education because I feel like if we do not go to these places, these people are going to remain ignorant about us. And I also find it as a way for us to educate ourselves. And when you go to places like this, you learn so much about humanity and just the different cultures, the different food, the origins of certain things. Like, for example, Asia, the religions, the Buddhism, and so on. You learn about the origin, where these things came from. You practice yoga. I mean, most of the time, you don't even know where yoga came from. So by going to these places, I find that I enrich my understanding of things. But the other thing that drives me to travel is because I just don't feel at home anywhere. I always feel as if I have to be on the road. If I'm at home here, I don't feel at home in London. If I go to Uganda, I spend a certain number of months in Uganda. I do not feel like I'm at home. So I kind of feel like I'm really a global citizen. I just don't feel like I belong anywhere. I just constantly have travel. And I think the other thing is there's so many things that you can't see if you don't travel. For example, if you I hike up mountains, and there's certain views that you can only see when you're on the top of a mountain. You're not going to get it from a helicopter. You're not going to get it from below. You have to walk up there to be able to see it. So those are the kind of things that inspire me. And the other thing actually that I forgot is meeting people. I like meeting people. I like to discover new places and talk to people. And I think I have made friends in so many different countries that I would not have been able to do had I not traveled to those places. So yeah, those are the things that make me constantly want to have my bags and go.
I mean, that would convince me as well. I mean, there's no reason why any of that wouldn't convince me to travel. So I want to go back to a couple of things that you mentioned. I want to bring up, in a time where we're in right now, we have SARS going on in Nigeria. We have civil unrest here in the United States. You mentioned Rwanda is not the Rwanda it used to be. You mentioned being treated as part of the help, or being treated differently while you were in certain parts of South Africa. Like, tell me, as you've experienced your travels, right? I mean, I'm not sure how much experience you've had here in the United States, but as a person of color, how have you been treated?
I think in my experience in the US, I can't say I've been treated any differently to how I was treated in the UK. So I don't think I really had that much of an issue with the US. Other parts of the world have been interesting. So in China, a lot of people stare. And I get a lot of people coming to take pictures. Some people will ask, some won't. Some will just come and hand you their children and say, picture. And then you just have to hold the child and take a picture. So now I kind of joke around with people that I charge. So for every picture that they want to take, they have to pay me some money. And I find that kind of breaks the ice. At the beginning, I really struggled with it. I used to get really agitated, and I used to get really frustrated when everywhere I went, people were staring, people were looking at me. Now, I just see it as curiosity. Yes, you will find instances where people are actually intentionally being racist. I mean, I've been to places in China where people are doing monkey signs.
People who are racist. However, I find that actually most of the time they're just not seen Black people in person. So they're just curious. And most of the time if you try to engage, even if you don't speak the language, they'll try and speak to you and try and actually get to know you. And most of the time it's just a curiosity thing. So now rather than getting offended, I just try and engage with people and try and educate them. And I find that works better because they're learning about me and my culture. And at the same time, I'm learning about them. So I try not to see it as I did at the beginning. At the beginning, I just thought, these people are racist, these people are treating me this way. Now I just try and see it the other way and just try, unless someone is being intentionally racist and I am aware that they're actually calling me names or making derogatory comments or signs. Unless they're doing that, now I actually just see it as someone's just curious. And within the African continent itself, other than the instances where, this actually happens a lot. It happens in Uganda, it happens in Kenya, where, so in Kenya, most of the time when I travel by myself. Or if I'm traveling in a group, I try and get there before everybody else and just see the place. So in Kenya, several times I've been mistaken for a prostitute. When I try to go back to the hotel, I'm always asked, "Who are you coming to see? What are you doing here?" So that happens. I find that happens a lot. Also, the other thing, actually, customs. I'm always stopped. Again, because I guess I'm traveling by myself, a Black woman traveling by themselves. I'm always stopped. My bags are always searched. And I don't know, maybe it's my hair. Maybe it's the fact that they have this assumption that Black women traveling by themselves are much more likely to be trafficking drugs. So, as I said, but now those things do not irritate me. I think after you've traveled a while, you kind of develop a thick skin. You just take all these things in your stride. You have a destination that you're going to. You do everything that you can to get to where you're going. The one place where I still struggle, and I'm not sure whether I'll be going back. So Egypt. I had very bad experience in Egypt. I found people very racist. So I don't know if I'd ever go back to Egypt. I had a similar experience when I was in Tunisia. Again, I found the people very condescending, very racist. So the Arab countries I have tended to struggle with. So I don't know whether or not I really, really want to go to Oman, but it's kind of going lower and lower in my list because of the experiences that I've had in the other Arab countries.
So now, have you asked your male guests or group members if they've experienced the same, or do you feel as though it was more directed because you were a woman?
Unfortunately, I don't get many male Black travelers, and I would really, 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 really love to just take a group of Black guys on a trip. Most of the time, unfortunately, it's women. I do find that as women, we travel more. Well, in the UK here anyway, as women, we just travel more than guys. And I've asked, why do you guys not come? Why do you not travel? And most of the time, the response I get is that, number one, they don't do organized trips. And number two, why would you want to go to those places? So I just find that really, really irritating. The fact that you don't want to go to somewhere like Bhutan, you don't want to go somewhere like Tibet. Why not, right? I just get irritated when people just go to places where they know people, or places where they're going to be staying in a nice hotel and eat the same food, see the same things that you see in London anyway. What's the point? So I find that unfortunately women my groups are just full of women, and the women just I'm more adventurous, at least when it comes to black people. I think I don't think I've been on any trip where there's been a Black guy. Really sad.
Yeah, that is.
Really,
You found one, right?
Good.
I will fly wherever you tell me to.
Good.
I'm also a photographer, so if you need a travel photographer, here I am. But no, I travel literally majority men, right? Majority of my trips are I do a guys trip every year. I travel with some of my friends from school. But I do agree with you. The majority of travelers out there are women. And during this podcast, I come to realize visually, women want to see more men talk about their experiences. And I find that there aren't a lot that's like open to talk about it, right? And so I'm working my way towards getting more male guests to talk about travel, to talk about why they enjoy traveling so much. And this is another reason why I'm doing this. It's look, I am traveling. You know, men do travel, and men do travel well. And then I had a gentleman actually live in London. He does fat men traveling, right? Plus size men traveling the world, and he expressed the same thing. You know, it's we're traveling, we just don't express it as much as women do, you know, especially the men on the plus size. And he's actually triggered a wave of plus size men being more comfortable expressing themselves and being able to expose themselves on travel, you know. But yeah, so I find that very interesting. We are always, it's been said we're slower to the game. And so you women are always trailblazing, so we are always here to make sure that we can keep up, you know. But yeah, that's interesting. But I say that to say because maybe you know, a lot of the guys that I've said that I've interviewed traveling said that, you know, they really haven't had these same issues, right? And so that's why I was trying to see whether or not there was, you know, a woman versus a man, a man's perspective on that. I mean, I've been to Egypt and I've been to South Africa, and I think it depends on one. I think at the airport, a lot of the times it depends on your passport, right? And two, I think a lot of times it depends on the accent, right? Depending on where you're coming from, they know not to mess with you, right? And then depending on, so for example, I went to the bazaar in Egypt, right? And one of the ways they identify people is by blurting out random things in the air to see how people react. So for example, at the bazaar, which is the big market of all the things in Cairo, one of the guys, hecklers, was like, "Welcome to Alaska," right? So all the Americans would laugh. Exactly, right? And so if you understand, you laughed because he said, "Welcome to Alaska," you speak English or you understand English, and you know he's not from there, which allows him to trigger to all the merchants to hike up their prices whenever you come around. You know, so we're targeted in ways that we don't even know sometimes when we travel. So what I do a lot of times, I speak Creole, and the person I went with speaks French. I can understand French, I just can't respond in French. So we'll just speak the language other than English so that we don't get caught. And she was bartering in French and making sure that she can get her price so that we wouldn't get the American / European prices. You know what I mean? So I say that to say, I think it depends on the person. It depends on the way you approach the experience, right? A lot of my guests says respect the culture. You know, you go in and, you know, a couple things I learned how to say is shakram. No, thank you was shakram, right? Shakra. Yeah, there we go. To say thank you, to say, you know, certain things, good morning, like depending on the language, because it makes a difference on how they treat you. Because if they see that you're taking an effort, they can respond kind. So I say all that to say, I'm interested to see when you do have more male experience, more male travelers, to see what that experience is at a later time. So, you know, season 4 and 5, I might come back to you, be like, hey, how has things changed? Right.
I am looking forward to more male travelers joining, actually. And yes, I myself would like to see what the experience would be, actually just having a balance of travelers, male and female, because up to now, I still haven't experienced that. So it would be interesting just to see what it's like.
We'll talk,
especially in Tibet.
We'll talk offline. We'll make that work out for you. So let's move forward to COVID. Right?
Yes.
Our new lifestyle, right? Where were you when things started to hit the fan about lockdowns and the numbers are increasing and how that's going to impact your life?
Yeah, I came back from Zimbabwe in January, and I had just began to settle back into work. And so, yes, I was in London. I had planned a trip to Norway for February. And yes, things got quite bad in London. So we began to, it started looking like the numbers were really high, and no, it wasn't going to happen. So I canceled that trip. And then, we were still going into work. But I think by beginning of March, I think the company realized that actually can't keep making people use public transport. So they told us all that we could work from home. So pretty much, I've been at home. I've been at home since March. So yes, it has been challenging because I like to be out and about. Even when I'm in London, I like to be out and about. I'm in the theatre, concerts. I run a book club, so I meet with our book club members once a month. Can't do that now. Everything's online, so I'm finding it really, really frustrating. Really frustrating. Yes.
So,
lockdown.
So for a person like you, and of course, like me, travel is like therapy, right? Travel is like breathing, right? Being able to experience and get out of the mundane. How have you kind of adjusted? I mean, we're now talking about the new normal, right?
Yeah.
Our new normal is maneuvering to open states, open countries, wearing masks, virtual life. How are you adjusting to all of that?
So I haven't traveled anywhere. I've been a wimp. I am hoping. I was supposed to be in Bhutan. In fact, now I'm supposed to be in Bhutan. So that hasn't happened. I am hoping at least before the end of the year to go somewhere. And I'm at the moment looking at Cape Verde or Ghana. So fingers crossed it does happen. With regards to adjusting, I've been reading a lot of travel blogs. Not something I was actually doing before. So just discovering what other people's experiences are. I have been podcasting. I started a podcast. Just something different to do. What else have I been doing? And yeah, just I've discovered my area. I never knew that I lived close to a river. I didn't realize that I had forests next to 10 minutes walk from where I live. So I guess with all the international traveling, I have completely neglected London and the UK. So one good thing about COVID, actually, it has helped me discover just my locality. And so I do a lot of walking, where I have been doing a lot of walking until the weather changed. So I normally do at least 2-3 hours by the river. I go forest bathing, and I have organized trips with friends just around the area, or gone to their area, the areas where they live, and just discovered, what's around. So that's sort of been my new normal, just discovering local things and then chatting to friends on a podcast. But it has been a struggle.
Okay. So, I'm trying to find this best way is like, what got you into becoming a tourist in your own country again?
It's funny enough. Well, I'm a tourist in Uganda and in London, actually. So in Uganda, when you live in the country, you don't appreciate it, right? You don't really know much about it because you're always hankering for something that's different. So I think that's one thing that's actually come out of this, is that I've wanted to discover a lot more about England, a lot more about the beauty, because there's actually a lot of beauty in this country. There are lots of green lands. There's lots of rivers and lakes, and there are a lot of places you can go hiking that I hadn't taken advantage of. So, I mean, I've discovered Seven Sisters, just the whole area by the coast where you can go hiking. I've discovered the West Coast. Again, something that would never have considered had it not been for COVID. So I think, yeah, it's made me realize that actually there is a lot of beauty everywhere. That's one thing I've discovered. And then in Uganda itself, when I still do feel like I'm a tourist, having been born there. Again, as I said, when you live somewhere, you don't really take advantage of it. So there are parts of Uganda that I just don't know anything about, even up to now, that I don't know anything about. So every time I go, I'm discovering something new. So when I was there, most of what I knew, the village where I was born, and I knew Kampala, and that was it. I've completely discovered Western Uganda, where it's completely different to the north. The north is very dry, very arid, whereas the west is very fertile, lots of mountains. So it's completely different. And I think one good thing about being a tourist and traveler is that you just discover the beauty that is the world. The world is beautiful. And I think more people should go out and see it.
Amazing. So with that being said, what would you give a novice traveler, someone looking to start traveling, advice to just get started?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is don't wait. I think for me, there was a time, the reason why I hadn't traveled for a long time before then I went to Barbados was because I was, waiting for people to go with. I was waiting for the right opportunity. And I've realized now that actually the right opportunity never comes and the right people are not there. If you want to go somewhere, just get up and go. What's the worst that's going to happen? Nothing bad is going to happen. You will meet a whole lot of people. One thing I've found is that people who travel are the friendliest people and are also the most open-minded people out there. So when you do go traveling and you're on your own, you will always make friends. So the first thing I would say is just go. Just pack your bags and go. And don't be afraid. Really, people are generally nice. Yes, you will find the odd person that's unpleasant, but generally humans are nice people. If you do go somewhere and you don't know anybody, you will make friends and you ask for directions. People are always willing to help and to give you directions. So I would say don't be afraid. And then the second thing I would say, maybe start off, somewhere close to home. And then when you are used to somewhere close to home, then, start venturing out much further. And then the one piece of advice I really like to impart is just don't go where you know people or where people speak the same language as you, because then it kind of takes the sense of adventure out of it. Go somewhere far, somewhere off the beaten track. And I would say to us Black people, I don't feel that we travel enough. And I don't feel like we appreciate traveling enough. And I find that traveling opens the mind. So please, 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 people, get out and travel, get out and see the world. It's beautiful.
Amazing.
So that would be my advice.
That's awesome. I mean, I couldn't put it in any better words. So tell us what you have going on. You got the podcast, you're a photographer, you can do travel. I mean, you're doing a lot, but I can't do you any justice. So tell us what you have going on and where people can find you.
Right. So I blog, cultureseekers.com, Culture Seekers with a K. I run a book club, London Afro-Caribbean Book Club. So unfortunately, this is only for people in London. Sorry, everybody outside London. But with COVID, we are actually having our meetings online. So if you do want to join for this period, you can join us online. It's called the London Afro-Caribbean Book Club. We read books by Black writers mainly, and Black writers from everywhere, or books that focus on the Black experience. So you can find us on Meetup if you search for London Afro-Caribbean Book Club. And then also, as I said earlier, I just started a podcast. It's with two other friends. It's called Sisters, Friends and Guests. And we are on Twitter, we are on Spotify, all the other podcast outlets. And it's Sisters, Guests and Friends. It's mainly a podcast about Black women. And we're trying to basically showcase the experience of Black women, and especially Black women in the diaspora. We're discussing the kind of issues that we face in the workplace, within society. We're talking about books, we're talking about travel, health, and we've just launched we've had some really interesting conversations. So I'd say just definitely go onto Spotify, and you find Spotify or Anchor, you find us there. And yeah, some very interesting topics.
That's amazing. I mean, look, COVID created a lot of creative people. Some of us who didn't think they were creative. I don't think I'm creative, but I like to talk and I like to listen to people talk. So once again, I am genuinely honored to have you on the show and appreciate the amazing stories you gave and wonderful insight as to your experience while traveling the world. And I only aspire to see a portion of what you've already seen, right? So once again, I really want to thank you for jumping on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm the one who should be honored to be invited to come onto the show. And thank you so much for having me. And yes, thank you for the good work that you're doing, because I think it's really required. I think we need to show that us Black people, we travel too, we have these experiences too. And I really commend you for the good work that you're doing.
Well, thank you.